Hi, so I wanted to go over what an annotated bibliography is since that assignment is coming due this week. And I also wanted to go over a sample annotated bibliography so that you kind of know what's expected of you so that you do well on this assignment because it is worth a lot of points and it does take significant effort on your part. So let's break this down into the idea of a bibliography and then what it means for it to be annotated. So, a bibliography is a list of sources, books, journals, websites, periodicals that you've used for researching a topic. Bibliographies are sometimes called references or works cited, kind of depending on what style you're using. And a bibliography usually just includes bibliographic information. So this would be like the information you put on a works cited page. So your the author of the text, the title of the text, where it was published, the date, your website address, if you had a website address, or whatever the case may be. An annotation is a summary or an evaluation of a bibliographic piece of information. So an annotated bibliography includes a summary or an evaluation of each of your sources. So what this shows is here's my source information, here's my bibliographic information, and then from reading the source, this is what I know. So there are four basic components to all strong annotated bibliography entries. Each source will have a citation that's in MLA format. Each source you will write a summary for, an evaluation or an assessment, and a reflection. So your summary, you can consider these questions when you're writing the summary for your source. What's the main argument of the source? What is the point of the book or article? What are the topics covered? If someone asked you what the article or book is about, what would you say? The length of your annotation will determine how detailed your summary is. I believe for this assignment, you're required an annotation of 8 to 10 sentences per source. So your summary might be 3 to 4 of those sentences. Then you're going to move into evaluating and assessing the source. So here you're going to ask questions of, is this a useful source? Or you're going to answer the questions, is this a useful source? How does it compare with other sources in the bibliography? Is the information reliable? Is this source biased or objective? What is the goal of the source? So here you're really looking at trying to determine how useful the source is. This of that 8 to 10 sentences, we're looking at 2 to 3 sentences here. And then the reflection. Once you've summarized and assessed your source, you'll need to ask how it fits into your research. Was the source helpful to you? How does it shape your argument? How can you use the source in your research project? Has it changed the way you think about your topic? So here, you're really going to say, okay, this source was helpful, this is why, or this shapes the argument being made because of da 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 da, whatever the case may be in your reflection. I would encourage you strongly that the sources that you include in your annotated bibliography, that those are the actual sources that you use in your paper. You're welcome to find more sources than the ones that are required for this assignment, just like you're allowed to use more than the required number of sources in your research paper. But now is a perfect time to make sure you have at least a few really good sources. So you don't want to, I would use this time to pick out good sources. I wouldn't want to just pick up the first three sources that I found to turn in this project. Okay, so now we're going to look at a sample annotated bibliography. I believe you have a link to this already in the assignment page for the annotated bibliography, but I want to walk through it so that you see all of the different pieces of it. This annotated bibliography has more variety in sources and numbers of sources. If you're watching this video in the spring of 2020, then probably what your assignment requires due to what's going on with coronavirus, your projects were changed just a bit. The requirements were. However, if this is after spring 2020, you're probably back to the normal requirements. Anyway, what I want to walk through is each of the elements of this. You will see that there are 5 sources here. There's a book source, there's online journals through the Valencia database. There may even be a website on here. Remember, again, if you're in spring 2020, you are doing 3 database articles from the Valencia databases for your topics. So first, we're going to be in that MLA setup. So your name, my name, the course, whatever course you're in, and the date. Then you're going to pose your research question. For this one, it was, how do gender, circumstances, and age affect the way people grieve? And then just annotated bibliography and whatever your topic is. Then you're going to get into your annotations. Your annotations will be in MLA format. It's very important that you set up your pages correctly with your works cited information in that MLA format now. That way I can check it. So when you get to the final draft of your paper, all you have to do is come in and pull these citations that you've already done and put those right on your page. Additionally, if you don't get something right now, this is a great opportunity for me to say, nope, this isn't right, so that you can correct it for your final draft. MLA for your final paper counts for, I think, 20% of your grade. So we want to make sure that we've got the MLA component of the citations correctly when we make it to that final paper. For this assignment, MLA counts for, I think, 20 or 25% of your grade. So we want to make sure we're doing a good job. So let's talk about the MLA by way of citations for a moment. Notice the indentation here. The first line's not indented. All subsequent lines are. Also, notice that when we look at the different sources, they are in alphabetical order. That is the requirement per MLA. So you want to make sure that you're following the proper indentation and you're following the proper order by way of alphabetical order. Also notice that we have the permalinks being used for the sources. When you are in the databases, you will need to look for the permalink or the DOI and include that. Here is why. I need to be able to check that you have correctly used your sources. So that link has to work. It is 100% important for that link to work. If the link does not work, I will send the assignment back to you and say, hey, your link's not working. I need you to resubmit. And you will lose points if those links aren't working. So do your best to get them working. Again, you're looking for the permalink or the DOI to place here. And also you want to include an access date. This is one of those optional requirements for MLA that I am requiring you to include, and here's why. Because the access date shows me when you looked at a source. And that's really important because if you're looking at a source today, April 1st is today's date when I'm making this video, your paper gets turned in on April, I think, 16th, 17th. That source could be updated between April 1st and April 16th or 17th. It maybe something's corrected or whatever the case may be. If I have your access date, then I know, okay, well, Johnny looked at this on April 1st and it was updated on April 5th, and maybe Johnny didn't see that. And so maybe if something has changed in that information that's in the paper, that's not counted against you for being inaccurate. So we want to make sure we have those access dates. Additionally, having those links is important on your works cited page or in an annotated bibliography, that the people who are reading those works cited pages and annotated bibliographies can get to your sources. It's really important because the purpose of these pages is to inform our reader about the specific sources so that they can go back and read more if they are interested to do so. Okay, so now we're going to get into our first annotation. I will say that this one, it should be tabbed over. So your annotations will be indented. And this is what she says. You're going to notice that we go through a summary, and then we get into the evaluation or assessment of the source, and then a reflection. So here's what it says. In the academic study, but I do believe you've got to accept that that's what life's about. Older adults living in New Zealand were asked about their experiences and viewpoints relating to the death of a close family member or spouse. This was done by telephone interviews with participants from another study that had lost a family member. and agreed to participate in this one. The study was done to see if there was a need for improved national bereavement support and services. The general consensus among older adults interviewed was that they were resilient in dealing with the deaths of a family member and spouses. The findings in the study indicated that older adults saw death as just a natural part of life. The older adults saw having a strong social and community network as an important part of being resilient in the face of grief. So here in this first part, we're getting that summary. And then, and she divided hers into two separate paragraphs, summary, one for summary and then one for assessment and reflection. That's perfectly fine. You are welcome to do it that way, or you can do all one paragraph, whichever you prefer. And this says, although this paper only examines a small population in New Zealand, internationally the aging population is growing. This is one small snapshot of a group of elderly adults, so it may not be completely unbiased. The sample size is small and not random, but nevertheless still useful. This source will help to show that age does affect the grieving process. It will help to prove the relationship to grief and age. So here, she's evaluating the source. She's saying, hey, it is only a small sample size. It could have some bias, but it's a good source because it's still showing what the research question is asking about age and the grieving process. Also notice that even though she's talking about her own project, she doesn't say, I will use this source or this source will help me to show. It's still in that third person academic point of view. So we're not going to use first person here. Then she gets into her second source. Here, this is what she says. And you'll notice that this annotation is a little bit shorter than the one before. She's still within the length requirements of the project, but this first source contained a lot more information than the second one. This comes from a website. She was allowed to use a website. Again, you guys, your requirements are a little bit different. You're only allowed to use the academic resources through the Valencia databases. Here's what this says. This is a website by Mental Health America. This particular article on the website discusses coping with loss. It also goes through the normal signs of what to expect when a death happens. It also discusses how to deal with a major loss depending on who has passed away and offers tips on how to cope with grief. The article, although short, offers good insight into what grief is. It explores how different circumstances affect the grieving process. This article will help to add details into what grief is. It discusses the way certain people grieve and why. There's not a lot of quantity of information, but it will help to answer the question of what affects grief. So she's always kind of bringing it back to that research question, like it's going to answer one of the parts of my research question. So if we go and look, how do gender, circumstance, and age affect the way people grieve? Well, her first source talks about age. Now we're talking about circumstances. So we see that these sources are working to answer whatever that research question that was asked. That's the whole point here, that we are finding sources that answer our research question. And then the actual paper you write will be written to answer that research question. While you won't actually use that question in your paper, nowhere in your paper are you going to say, how do gender, circumstance, and age affect the way people grieve? Your thesis is ultimately going to answer it, saying the way people grieve is strongly affected by gender, circumstance, and age, or something to that effect. So you're going to flip that research question into a thesis when you get to your paper. I'm going to go through one more of her sources with you. And then this paper, this annotated bibliography is available to you at the bottom of the assignment page for the annotated bibliography, so you can continue looking through it if you need to. This one, we have another source by Eric Miller. We have our MLA works cited entry, and this is what this one says. In the scientific study in the International Journal of Psychology, Eric Miller relays the results of a study done at Kent State University. The study was done on 161 graduates and was made up of 55 males and 106 females. The study looked at people's views on how a person should grieve. The participants were asked to rate the appropriateness of grief based on the length of time, nature of loss, and gender. For example, they might have been asked to rate the appropriateness of a man attending a party after losing his spouse 1 month ago. The participants were given a combination of 8 variations. So here we have a good summary. Then she's going to move into evaluation and reflection. This source can be very useful in assessing society's views on what's appropriate for those who grieve. The perceptions of society shape the way people act and feel and can have a significant influence on them. The study can help to prove that the way people view those who grieve is a reflection of the way people actually grieve. People do, in fact, have opinions on how a person grieves based on how long it's been since the loved one has passed, if they are male or female, and if they've lost either a spouse or a child. Again, she has 2 more sources here, and you can look through those on your own. But I wanted to share this with you today just so you have an idea of what's being asked of you so that you do a good job with this assignment, because again, it's worth a lot of points and I want you to do well. If you have questions or you need help, please let me know.